The crystalline spires of the Galactic Council headquarters pierced the violet sky of Centauri Prime, their surfaces reflecting the light of three setting suns. Inside the vast circular chamber, representatives from 100 worlds shifted in their gravity-adjusted pods, all eyes fixed on the chamber's entrance. The massive doors, etched with the history of 1,000,000 years of space exploration, slowly parted. Dr. Sarah Chen took a deep breath, straightened her formal Earth Alliance uniform, and stepped forward. Her footsteps echoed across the polished floor, each click of her boots amplified by the perfect acoustics of the chamber. She felt the weight of countless alien gazes upon her, some curious, others skeptical, a few openly hostile. Representative Chen, Elder Krisk's translator, conveyed their clicking speech into standard Galactic. The mantis-like being's compound eyes reflected the chamber's soft illumination. You are Earth's first xenobiologist to join the Council's science division. Your credentials are interesting. Sarah maintained her professional composure, though she couldn't help but notice how the Elder's mandibles twitched, a sign of barely contained doubt. Thank you, Elder. I'm honored to contribute Earth's perspective to the Council's scientific endeavors. Perspective, a melodious voice chimed in. Delegate Lumen floated forward in their liquid suspension chamber, bioluminescent patterns dancing across their translucent form. That is precisely what concerns us. Earth is young among the spacefaring nations. Your species has barely mastered faster than light travel. With respect, Delegate, Sarah responded, activating her datapad. Sometimes fresh eyes see what experienced ones have learned to overlook. The chamber hummed with translated murmurs. Elder Krisk raised their primary limbs for silence. Then let us test these fresh eyes of yours. We face a crisis that has challenged the Council's finest minds for generations. The chamber's central holographic array shimmered to life. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as the image materialized, a creature of such magnificent power that it seemed to fill the vast space. 6 limbs, each ending in crystalline claws that could shred battleship armor. Scales that shifted colors like oil on water. A head that housed 4 independently tracking eyes and sensory organs that Earth scientists could only dream of understanding. The next wrath, Elder Krisk announced gravely. They have claimed 17 resource-rich worlds across 3 sectors. Every attempt at colonization has ended in disaster. Every diplomatic mission has failed. Every scientific study has been abandoned. Sarah studied the hologram intently, her mind already racing with observations. The creature's musculature, its joint articulation, the way it held its head, something about it triggered her researcher's instincts. 3 days ago, Lumen continued, their lights pulsing with concern, a Nexrath pack was discovered on Mining Colony 7. The evacuation is already underway. We lose another vital world to these beings. Have we tried understanding their behavior patterns? Sarah asked, her fingers flying across her datapad. Their social structure, their communication methods. A harsh laugh came from one of the upper pods. Understanding. They are apex predators, human. They do not negotiate. They do not communicate. They claim territory and destroy anything that enters it. Sarah looked up from her notes, her expression thoughtful. Every predator species has patterns. Has anyone studied them without prejudice? Without fear? The last xenobiologist who attempted such a study was found in pieces, Elder Krisk stated bluntly. We keep one specimen in maximum containment for essential research. You will be briefed on safety protocols tomorrow. For now, remember this. Do not approach the containment unit. Do not attempt contact. Do not even maintain eye contact if the creature faces you. They sense fear, and they attack anything that shows weakness. Sarah nodded professionally, but her mind was already racing with possibilities. The way the holographic Nexrath moved, the positioning of its sensory organs, the complex color patterns of its scales, she had seen something like this before. Not the same, but similar enough to spark an idea. She had a theory forming, but she knew better than to voice it yet. Sometimes the best way to introduce a revolutionary idea was to let others see it in action first. The containment facility hummed with energy fields and security systems. Sarah stood before the massive observation window, her reflection ghosting against the reinforced transparency. Behind her, a group of council security officers shifted nervously, their weapons held ready despite the multiple layers of protection between them and the facility's sole occupant. Dr. Chen, the facilities director, a tall Varian named Axel, managed to make her title sound like a warning. The standard observation period is 10 minutes, no sudden movements, no direct eye contact. Sarah barely nodded, her attention fixed on her datapad as she recorded her observations. The containment chamber beyond the window was enormous, designed to give the Nexrath enough space to move without feeling trapped. The creature within moved with liquid grace, its iridescent scales shifting through patterns of blue and green. Fascinating, she murmured, noting how the Nexrath's movement patterns changed when it approached different sections of the chamber. The color variations aren't random. They're responding to environmental stimuli. Movement detected in Observation Port 3, an automated system announced. The Nexrath's head snapped toward their window, all four eyes focusing with predatory intensity. The security team took 3 steps back. Sarah remained in place, her stylus moving rapidly across her screen. Dr. Chen, Cell hissed, stepped back from the window. Now. Instead, Sarah took a half-step closer. The Nexrath's scales rippled with a new pattern, bands of color racing from head to tail. It approached the window with deliberate steps, each movement precisely controlled. "Look at this behavior," Sarah said, excitement creeping into her voice. "The approach pattern, the eye movement, the way it's positioning its secondary limbs. This isn't aggressive display. It's assessment. It's hunting," one of the security officers insisted. "We've seen this before. It's calculating angles of attack." Sarah shook her head, still recording. "No, look at the scale patterns. If you compare them to Earth's cephalopods, specifically octopi, you'll see similar color waves during information gathering. It's learning about us." The Nexrath was fully focused on their window now, its massive form nearly filling their view. Its scales had settled into a steady rhythm of color changes, like waves lapping ashore. Sarah's fingers flew across her datapad, capturing every detail. "Recording complete," she announced, finally stepping back. "I'd like to review the security footage from other observations. Are there any records of different species interactions with the specimen?" Tazel stared at her as if she'd grown a second head. "You want to study more? Most representatives don't last 5 minutes in here." "Most representatives aren't looking at the right things," Sarah replied, reviewing her notes. "Has anyone documented a correlation between observer behavior and the specimen's color patterns, or mapped its movement patterns against environmental changes?" Dr. Chen, Tell's voice carried the weight of someone who had seen too many tragedies. The last 3 research teams focused on containment and defense. The Nexrath didn't leave them time for behavioral studies. Sarah looked up from her datapad, her expression thoughtful. Then they missed the most important data. Every movement this being makes is rich with information. The way it approaches boundaries, the precise control of its limbs, the complex color communications. These aren't the actions of a mindless predator. She turned to face the security team, who still hadn't lowered their weapons. "I need access to all available data on Nexrath encounters, including the failed attempts at colonization and the unfortunate research incidents." "You're suggesting we study the very encounters that led to losses?" Cell's facial ridges darkened with concern. "Every interaction is data," Sarah said firmly. "Even the tragic ones, especially those, because I'm beginning to think we've been misinterpreting everything about these beings from the start." The Nexrath watching them shifted its colors one final time, a cascade of patterns that Sarah's trained eye recognized as remarkably similar to the information-sharing displays of Earth's most intelligent marine species. She made one final note on her datapad. Hypothesis: Nexrath aggression may be a response to being misunderstood. further study required. The council chamber buzzed with tension as Sarah's holographic presentation filled the vast space. Three-dimensional images of Nexrath behavioral patterns floated above the central platform, accompanied by data streams that scrolled past in multiple languages. Distinguished members of the council, Sarah began, her voice steady despite the weight of hundreds of critical gazes. My analysis of the containment facility footage has revealed something extraordinary. Please observe this comparison. The hologram shifted, showing a split screen. On one side, the contained Nexrath's movement patterns played out in real time. On the other, a series of recordings from Earth's great cats, tigers, lions, and panthers in various wildlife preserves. Note the similarity in territorial marking behaviors. Sarah highlighted specific sequences. The careful testing of boundaries, the repetitive patrol patterns, and most importantly, the response to outside observation. Elder Krisk's mandibles clicked rapidly. You compare these apex predators of the galaxy to your Earth fauna. The Nexrath have destroyed entire colonial outposts. Yes, Sarah acknowledged, but look at the circumstances of those destructions. She pulled up incident reports, their grim statistics floating in the air. Every single violent encounter began with what we perceived as unprovoked aggression. But watch this. The hologram shifted to security footage from one of the destroyed outposts. Sarah froze the frame just before the attack. See the scale patterns here. Compare them to this footage from our contained specimen during standard research protocols. The images aligned, showing identical color waves rippling across Nexrath scales. These aren't threat displays, Sarah explained, her excitement breaking through her professional demeanor. They're attempts at communication. The same patterns appear in every encounter, but we've been interpreting them wrong. The Nexrath were trying to establish understanding before each incident. Delegate Lumen's bioluminescence pulsed with skepticism. You suggest centuries of xenobiological research has simply misunderstood. Exactly. Sarah brought up new data streams. We approached them as mindless predators, so they responded to perceived threats. It's a cycle of escalation that began with our own preconceptions. The chamber erupted in multiple languages, translation systems, struggling to keep up with the overlapping voices. Sarah waited for the commotion to settle before continuing. I propose a radical change in our approach. Based on my observations, I believe the Nexrath possessed not only high intelligence, but a complex social structure we've completely overlooked. Their color patterns aren't just displays. They're a sophisticated language. And I suppose you have a proposal. Elder Krisk's tone carried centuries of skepticism. Sarah took a deep breath. I request permission to attempt direct communication with the contained specimen. No barriers, no weapons, no traditional containment protocols. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the chamber's environmental systems seemed to pause. Impossible. A voice called from the upper tiers. It would be suicide. It would be progress. Sarah countered. She gestured to her data. Everything we know about the Nexrath is based on fear. We've never tried to truly understand them. Look at this footage again. Every color pattern, every movement speaks of intelligence. They're not attacking us. They're responding to our fear and aggression with their own. Elder Krisk rose to their full height. Dr. Chen, while your analysis is interesting, we cannot risk. We risk more by continuing our current approach. Sarah interrupted, breaking protocol. The 17 worlds we've lost. We didn't lose them to mindless predators. We lost them to a species we never tried to understand. A species that, by all my research, has been attempting to communicate with us from the very first encounter. The council chamber filled with murmurs again, but this time they carried notes of consideration rather than pure dismissal. Sarah pressed for advantage. Give me one chance to prove my theory. If I'm wrong, she paused, meeting Elder Krisk's compound eyes directly, well, then the council will have one less radical human scientist to worry about. The containment facility's warning lights cast crimson shadows across empty corridors. Emergency protocols had triggered an immediate evacuation, But Sarah remained at her observation post, her eyes fixed on the readings from the facility's power grid. Dr. Chen, the facility's AI intoned, evacuation is mandatory. Power fluctuations have compromised containment field stability. She ignored the warning, focused on the next raft's reaction to the failing containment field. Its scales rippled with patterns she'd never seen before, but they seemed strangely familiar. Fascinating, she muttered, recording every detail. The color frequency matches distress patterns documented in social marine species. The overhead speakers crackled. Dr. Chen. Cell's voice carried equal parts anger and concern. The backup generators are failing. You must leave now. But Sarah had already made her decision. The past week of research had revealed patterns that no one else had bothered to see. The Nexrath wasn't just pacing, it was performing specific movements, repeating color sequences that matched known communication patterns from Earth's most intelligent species. The containment field flickered, its blue energy barrier becoming transparent in patches. The Nexrath's movement changed instantly, but not in the way everyone had predicted. Instead of charging the weakening barrier, it backed away, its scales shifting through patterns that Sarah's research had linked to uncertainty and caution. Security systems failing, the AI announced. Containment breach imminent. Emergency protocols engaged. Heavy blast doors began descending around the observation area. Sarah had seconds to make a choice. Run for safety or trust in her research. The containment field gave one final surge before collapsing entirely. She took a deep breath and pressed the manual override for her observation room's protective barrier. Dr. Chen. Cell's voice reached panic levels. What are you doing? Testing a hypothesis, she replied calmly, her voice steady despite her racing heart. The barrier between her and the Nexrath disappeared with a soft hum. The creature turned all four eyes toward her, its massive form seeming to fill the space. Security cameras whirred, documenting what many believed would be her last moments. But Sarah saw what the others missed: the subtle shift in posture, the careful positioning of secondary limbs, the complex color patterns that rippled across its scales. "Hello," she said softly, maintaining a relaxed posture. "I understand now. We've been frightening you just as much as you've been frightening us." The Nexrath's scales shifted through shades of blue and green, patterns flowing like waves. Sarah recognized the sequence from her research. Information gathering, not threat display. "That's right," she continued, her voice gentle. "No barriers this time. No weapons. No fear." She slowly raised her hand, palm out, in what her research suggested would be interpreted as a non-threatening gesture. The Nexrath's color patterns intensified, but it didn't retreat. Instead, it lowered its head slightly, four eyes blinking in an alternating pattern that matched communication sequences she documented. Through the facility's speakers, she could hear the chaos of the evacuation, the shouted warnings, the demands that she run. But Sarah remained still, focused entirely on the magnificent being before her. "You've been trying to talk to us all along, haven't you?" she asked quietly. Every display, every pattern, every movement, it was all communication. We just never stopped to listen. The Nexrath moved forward with deliberate grace, its steps measured and precise. Its scales now pulsed with a new pattern, one she'd never seen in any of the threat assessment footage. The colors flowed like gentle auroras, reminiscent of the bioluminescent displays of Earth's deep-sea creatures during peaceful encounters. Security cameras captured the moment that would soon change galactic history. A human standing calmly as one of the most feared beings in known space approached her with what she now recognized as cautious curiosity. The security feeds transmitted to every screen in the facility's command center, where council representatives watched in stunned silence. On the main display, Sarah stood perfectly still as the Nexrath approached, its massive form dwarfing her human frame. "Remarkable color patterns," Sarah's voice came through clearly on the audio feed. "Look at how the waves flow from anterior to posterior. It's almost exactly like the communication displays of Earth's cuttlefish." Elder Krisk's mandibles clicked rapidly. She's taking notes. At a time like this? Recording observations until the end, Sal muttered. Typical human behavior. But the end didn't come. Instead, the next raft stopped precisely 2 meters from Sarah, its scales now producing a mesmerizing display of shifting pastels. All 4 eyes blinked in sequence, focusing and refocusing as it studied her. Sarah slowly reached for her datapad, movements deliberate and smooth. "I'm going to try something," she announced to the recording systems. Based on observed patterns, this color sequence indicates information exchange rather than threat display. The command center erupted in protests, but Sarah had already begun her experiment. She activated her pad's display function, projecting a simple pattern of moving colors into the air between her and the next raft. The pattern matched one she documented during her observation sessions. The reaction was immediate. The next raft's scales rippled with new colors, matching and then building upon the pattern she'd shown. Sarah's laugh of delight echoed through the speakers. "It's a dialogue," she explained, her voice thick with emotion. "They're not just color changes. They're sentences, ideas." The next raft species developed a visual language as complex as any spoken one. Watching from the command center, Delegate Lumen's bioluminescence pulsed with growing excitement. Impossible, yet we're seeing it. Sarah carefully adjusted her projection, incorporating elements from the next raft's latest display. The creature's response changed again, its movements becoming more fluid, almost graceful. It lowered its head to her eye level, primary limbs relaxed at its sides. "I'm going to attempt physical contact now," she announced, causing several council members to gasp. All observations indicate positive social interaction patterns. "Dr. Chen," Sal's voice shook, "please reconsider." But Sarah was already moving, her hand extending slowly toward the next raft's scaled head. The creature watched her approach, its color patterns flowing in gentle waves that her research had linked to curiosity rather than aggression. The moment her hand made contact with the next raft's scales, every being in the command center held their breath. The scales felt smooth beneath her fingers, warm with life and slightly vibrating, like touching the surface of a purring cat. Then came the sound, a deep, resonant thrumming that seemed to fill the entire facility. The next raft's scales produced a cascade of colors that flowed like aurora borealis, painting the air with living light. "Absolutely incredible," Sarah whispered, her free hand flying across her datapad. The vibration frequency matches contentment sounds produced by Earth's large felines. Cross-species behavioral parallels on this scale. This changes everything we thought we knew. In the command center, the council representatives watched in amazement as the next raft pressed its head gently into Sarah's touch, 4 eyes half closed in what could only be described as pleasure. The creature's secondary limbs relaxed completely, its posture transforming from the alert stance they'd documented for centuries to something entirely new. "Send me a research team," Sarah's voice carried new authority. "But only volunteers, and they have to follow my protocols exactly. No weapons, no barriers, no fear. We're going to rewrite everything we think we know about interspecies communication." The security feeds captured every angle of this historic moment. A human scientist calmly scratching the head of the galaxy's most feared predator while taking notes one-handed, as the next raft's pleased rumble shook dust from the facility's ceiling. The training facility's observation deck buzzed with excitement as Sarah guided her first class of xenobiologists through their initial next raft interaction protocols. Below, in the spacious interaction chamber, a young next raft moved through a series of color displays while 3 students practiced matching the patterns with their holographic projectors. "Notice the subtle variations in the blue-green spectrum," Sarah pointed out, her datapad displaying detailed analysis of the color waves. "That slight pulse at the edge of each pattern, it's their equivalent of a question mark." The students, representing species from across the galaxy, recorded every detail. Even Elder Krisk's youngest offspring clicked their mandibles in fascination as they adjusted their projector's output to match the delicate patterns. "Remember," Sarah continued, They don't just see these colors, they feel them. The patterns create subtle vibrations in their sensory organs. That's why our early attempts at communication failed. We were essentially shouting random syllables at them. Through the reinforced windows, they watched as one student, a young Varian named Mel, successfully replicated a complex greeting pattern. The next raft's response was immediate, a cascade of warm colors flowing across its scales like sunset on water. Perfect. Sarah beamed. You've just said peaceful greetings in perfect Nexrath. Notice how the response patterns indicate openness to dialogue. The security feeds from their first successful contact had spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Now, 3 months later, the waiting list for Sarah's training program included some of the most prestigious xenobiologists in known space. Dr. Chen, a melodic voice called from the doorway. Delegate Lumen floated in, their transparent form glowing with interest. The council requires an update on your progress. Sarah gestured to the scene below, where Mel had progressed to more complex exchanges. See for yourself. We've already trained 36 specialists in basic Nexrath communication. The success rate is climbing with each new group. The delegates' bioluminescence pulsed with approval as they watched the Nexrath engage in what was clearly a sophisticated exchange of ideas with the students. And the practical applications. Better than we hoped, Sarah brought a holographic map showing disputed territories. 2 colonial outposts have already established peaceful contact with local Nexrath populations. Once we understood their territorial greeting customs, negotiations became surprisingly straightforward. She switched the display to show footage from one of the colonies. A Nexrath pack moved carefully around human structures, their scales displaying the newly documented patterns for curiosity and peaceful coexistence. They're not just tolerating us, Sarah explained, pride evident in her voice. They're learning about us just as we're learning about them. Look at this footage from yesterday. The hologram showed a Nexrath using its secondary limbs to help colonial engineers locate unstable ground before construction began. Its scales rippled with warning patterns that now serve to protect rather than threaten. Extraordinary, Lewin admitted, though some council members remained skeptical. They questioned whether this success can be replicated on a larger scale. Sarah's response was interrupted by excited chirping from below. Everyone turned to watch as the young Nexrath carefully extended one of its crystalline claws toward Mel, who had perfected the color pattern for trust and respect. Observe closely, Sarah whispered. This is only the 4th time we've seen this behavior. With infinite gentleness, the Nexrath used its claw to trace patterns in the air, mimicking the holographic displays the students have been using. The colors flowing across its scales matched the movements perfectly, creating a 3-dimensional form of communication never before documented. They're not just learning our methods, Sarah said softly, her datapad recording everything. They're developing new ways to bridge the communication gap. Every day, they show us more proof of their intelligence and adaptability. She turned to Lumen with quiet confidence. Tell the council that we're not just avoiding conflicts anymore. We're opening doors to collaboration that will benefit both species for generations to come. Mining colony, Epsilon's warning sirens pierced the dawn of its longest day. Ground sensors had detected movement in the crystalline forests. A lot of movement. Security feeds showed what everyone had feared. A pack of Nexrath, at least 12 strong, approaching the colony's outer boundaries. Hold positions, Sarah's voice carried calm authority over the command channel. Remember your training. No defensive posturing, no weapons activation. Let's show them we remember the proper greetings. The colony's newly installed color projection arrays hummed to life, sending carefully choreographed patterns of light into the morning mist. The display represented months of refined communication protocols, expressing peaceful intentions and recognition of shared territory. Through her binoculars, Sarah studied the pack's approach. The lead Nexrath, larger than any she'd documented before, moved with the fluid grace she'd come to appreciate. Its scales shifted through complex patterns that her trained eye now read as easily as text. They're acknowledging our greeting, she reported, her datapad recording every detail. Note the secondary color bands. This is a familial group, not a hunting party. See how the younger ones stay close to the central formation. Colony Director Mason fidgeted beside her. That's fascinating, Doctor, but they're still getting closer. Should we activate the emergency protocols? Sarah shook her head, never taking her eyes off the approaching pack. Watch their scale patterns. The lead one, I believe it's their matriarch, is displaying friendship markers we documented last month at the research facility. The massive Nexrath stopped at the exact boundary where the colony's greeting lights met the morning mist. Its scales rippled with colors that flowed like liquid rainbows, creating patterns more complex than any they'd seen before. Incredible, Sarah breathed, her fingers flying across her datapad. They're using a diplomatic dialect. The matriarch is formally requesting permission to share territory. She turned to Mason with barely contained excitement. This is unprecedented. They're initiating official first contact. Following the protocols Sarah had developed, the colony's projection arrays adjusted their output, matching and expanding upon the Nexrath's patterns. The response was immediate. The entire pack's scales lit up in synchronized displays of acceptance. Now comes the crucial part, Sarah said softly. Director Mason, you need to make the physical greeting. You're the colony's leader. It needs to come from you. Mason swallowed hard but stepped forward. 3 months of training kicked in as she moved through the carefully practiced motions, her colony's future hanging on each step. The Nexrath matriarch watched her approach, 4 eyes tracking every movement. When Mason extended her hand, palm up in the traditional Earth gesture that had somehow become a galactic standard for peaceful contact, the matriarch lowered its massive head. The touch lasted only seconds, but it sealed an agreement that would reshape colonial relations forever. Within hours, the colony hummed with unprecedented activity. The Nexrath pack moved through the settlement with surprising grace, their scales constantly shifting with patterns of curiosity and cooperation. Young ones played with scanning equipment, their natural sensitivity to mineral compositions leading them straight to rich veins that the colony's instruments had missed. They're not just accepting our presence, Sarah reported to the council later that day, her face glowing with vindication. They're actively improving our operations. The pack matriarch has already helped us identify 3 new crystal deposits richer than anything we've mined before. The security feeds showed the scene that would soon become famous across the galaxy. Human miners working alongside Nexrath, the creature's natural abilities complementing colonial technology in ways no one had imagined possible. When one section of tunnel showed signs of instability, the Nexrath detected it before any instruments could warn them, their scales flashing danger patterns that saved lives. We're not just coexisting, Sarah concluded, watching a young Nexrath carefully guide a survey team around a hidden crystal formation. We're building something entirely new, true symbiosis between species. The Galactic Council chamber looked vastly different from the day Sarah first walked through its crystalline doors. Now, a year after her breakthrough, the raised platforms accommodated beings that no one had ever expected to see in these halls. A Nexrath ambassador, scales shimmering with formal diplomatic patterns, stood proudly among representatives from 100 worlds. The integration program has exceeded all projections, Sarah reported, her presentation floating in the chamber center. 17 previously contested worlds have established successful cooperation protocols. Nexrath communities are now actively participating in colonial development across 3 sectors. The chamber's holographic displays showed scenes that would have been unthinkable just months ago. Nexrath helping to establish new settlements, their natural abilities complementing colonial technology in ways that benefited everyone. Their sensitivity to geological conditions had revolutionized mining operations, while their protective instincts had saved countless lives from natural disasters. But perhaps most exciting, Sarah continued, bringing up new data streams, is the cultural exchange. The Nexrath's visual language has inspired breakthroughs in xenolinguistics. Their understanding of color-based communication has helped us bridge gaps with 3 other species previously considered too alien for meaningful dialogue. Elder Krisk, who had once doubted her theories, now clicked their mandibles in approval. And the new training center? We understand the waiting list grows daily. Sarah smiled, switching the display to show the sprawling facility that had grown from her first experimental classes. We've graduated over 200 certified xenobiologists in NextRAF communication protocols. But more importantly, we've established the first cross-species teaching program. The hologram focused on a fascinating scene. A young NextRAF instructor, its scales producing complex educational patterns, teaching a class of diverse species about mineral detection. Next to it, a human teacher helped others understand the subtle variations in NextRAF color language. They're not just subjects of study anymore, Sarah explained, pride evident in her voice. They're partners, teachers, colleagues. The NextRAF have their own scientists now, studying us just as we study them. The exchange of knowledge flows both ways. Delegate Lumen's bioluminescence pulsed with curiosity. And what of the proposal for the new diplomatic corps? Sarah gestured to her right, where her former student Mel stood alongside a NextRAF whose scales rippled with mentor pattern displays. The first joint human NextRAF diplomatic teams are ready for deployment. Their mission is to apply our successful communication protocols to other misunderstood species across known space. The chamber's attention turned to the NextRAF ambassador as it stepped forward, its scales producing the newly standardized patterns for formal address. The universal translators, recently updated with Sarah's complete color language database, converted the display into words all could understand. Once, we thought ourselves alone in our understanding, the translator conveyed. Humans showed us that different minds can meet in understanding. That fear can become friendship. Together, we will find others who wait to be understood. Sarah watched as the chamber erupted in supportive displays from a dozen species. Light patterns, pheromone releases, subsonic rumbles, all expressing unity in their own ways. Her datapad blinked with updates from across the galaxy. New successful contacts, expanding cooperation, barriers falling. In her office later that day, she sat at her desk, surrounded by living proof of how far they'd come. A young NextRAF researcher worked at a nearby console, its scales occasionally flickering with questions that Sarah now understood as easily as spoken words. On her wall, the security footage from that first groundbreaking contact played on loop, a reminder of how fear had transformed into understanding. Her communication panel chimed with requests from distant colonies seeking guidance, from scientists eager to learn, from species hoping to bridge their own communication gaps. Sarah smiled as she read them, remembering how it all started with one simple realization. Sometimes the scariest things in the galaxy were just waiting for someone to listen.